The moment the boardroom door swung open, I knew the air had shifted. A man strode in with a razor-sharp smile, moving through the space as if he already owned every square inch of it. The new CEO, they whispered, young, ruthless, ready to modernize everything my father's generation had built. He didn't know it yet, but the game he was starting would end with me sitting in his chair. 18 years I'd given this company. They were about to learn what that really meant. My name is Claire Whitford, and I'd spent 18 years building my life within the glass walls of Vertex Dynamics. Starting as a project support assistant fresh out of college, I'd climbed every rung of the corporate ladder through late nights, sacrificed weekends, and an unwavering belief that loyalty meant something. By 41, I'd become Senior Director of Innovation Strategy, overseeing projects that generated 40% of our annual revenue. The corner office wasn't mine yet, but everyone knew my fingerprints were on every major success story the company had written in the past decade. That Tuesday morning in March changed everything. Ethan Marlowe walked into our quarterly review meeting 20 minutes late, unapologetic. His Armani suit as sharp as the smile that never quite reached his eyes. At 35, he was everything the board wanted: Harvard MBA, Silicon Valley pedigree, and a reputation for aggressive transformation. The kind of executive who used words like synergy and disruption the way other people breathed. "Let's talk about reinvention," he announced, bypassing any introduction. His assistant had already distributed new tablets to everyone. Apparently, printed reports were now obsolete thinking. I watched him pace the room, noting how he commanded attention with calculated pauses and direct eye contact with everyone except me. When he finally presented his vision for Vertex's future, my stomach tightened. Every initiative he outlined, the AI integration framework, the cross-platform development strategy, even the partnership with Asian manufacturers, had originated from proposals I'd submitted over the past 3 years. "These fresh perspectives will catapult us into the next decade," Ethan declared, his hand sweeping across the projected slides. "It's time to think beyond the limitations of legacy mindsets." Legacy. The word hung in the air like a verdict. During the break, I cornered him by the coffee station. "Those initiatives you presented, impressive alignment with your thinking, isn't it?" He stirred his espresso without looking up. "Though I've naturally enhanced them with modern execution strategies. Your original concepts were foundational. But foundation isn't architecture, Claire." The dismissal was surgical, precise. He'd taken my ideas, repackaged them with buzzwords and flash, and claimed the architecture as his own. When I returned to the meeting, I noticed the subtle shift. Younger team members leaning forward when he spoke, their eyes bright with ambition and opportunity. The veterans, those who'd been here long enough to recognize my work, kept their gazes down, already reading the writing on the wall. Over the following weeks, the erosion began in earnest. Meeting invitations that once landed in my inbox reflexively now mysteriously disappeared. The Johnson Industries contract I'd been nurturing for 6 months was reassigned to Marcus Brennan, Ethan's newly hired senior vice president, who happened to be his former colleague from a previous transformation. "You understand, Claire," Ethan explained during a brief hallway encounter, his tone patronizing enough to draw blood. "Marcus needs a significant win to establish credibility. You've already proven yourself. This is about building bench strength. Building bench strength by benching me." The final insult came during the April Innovation Summit, an event I'd created 5 years ago. As I prepared to deliver the keynote on our technology roadmap, a presentation I'd refined over countless hours, Ethan's assistant intercepted me. "Small change in the agenda," she chirped, not meeting my eyes. "Ethan will be handling the keynote. He wants you to focus on the breakout session instead. 3rd floor? The smaller conference room. The smaller conference room, where forgotten initiatives went to die." I sat in the main auditorium instead, watching Ethan deliver my presentation nearly word for word, adding only theatrical gestures and his signature phrase, "Revolutionary thinking for revolutionary times." The applause was thunderous. The board members in the front row nodded approvingly. And I finally understood. I wasn't being pushed aside, I was being erased. That night, I stayed late in my office, not working, but remembering. 18 years of memories lined these walls. Patent certificates, team photos, the framed first dollar from our IPO. My fingers traced the edge of my father's old leather portfolio, tucked behind leadership books I'd collected over the years. Richard Whitford had been a different kind of businessman, one who believed in handshakes and keeping your word. He'd died when I was 23, just a year into this job, proud that his daughter was following in his footsteps. "Build something that matters, Claire," he'd said, "and never let them forget whose shoulders they're standing on." I pulled the portfolio from the shelf, dust motes dancing in the lamplight. Inside were his old papers, some Vertex Dynamics documents from before the company even had its current name. I'd kept them for sentiment, nothing more. But as Ethan's laughter echoed from the executive floor above, I wondered if my father had left me more than just memories. The game was changing, but I'd been playing it longer than Ethan Marlowe could imagine. He thought he was writing my ending. He had no idea he was actually writing his own beginning and his own inevitable conclusion. The isolation began with surgical precision, each cut designed to look coincidental. First came the Monday morning leadership meetings. For 15 years, my seat at the executive table had been third from the head, close enough to influence every major decision. That May morning, I arrived to find the conference room locked, a new location posted, the C-suite boardroom, access restricted to essential personnel only. My key card, mysteriously, had lost its clearance over the weekend. Technical glitch, Ethan's assistant Sandra assured me with practiced sympathy. It will sort it out soon. It never did. The WebEx invites started arriving instead. Join virtually, they suggested, as if presence could be digitized without losing its power. I'd watch through my screen as Ethan redistributed my projects like organs from a donor. Each piece vital, each removal bringing me closer to corporate death. Claire's bandwidth is precious, he'd explained to the room, his concern so perfectly manufactured. We need her focused on strategic thinking, not bogged down in execution details. Strategic thinking, code for irrelevance. The Prometheus project, my baby, 3 years in development, set to revolutionize our entire cloud infrastructure, was handed to Jessica Palmer, a 30-year-old VP Ethan had poached from Amazon. The announcement came via email, CC'd to 40 people, with my name mentioned once in the final paragraph. We thank Claire for her foundational contributions. Foundational. There was that word again, burying me beneath everyone else's success. I confronted Jessica in her new office, my old conference room, now converted into her innovation hub, complete with standing desks and motivational posters about disruption. "I appreciate you laying the groundwork," she said, not looking up from her 3 monitors. "Ethan thinks fresh eyes will help us pivot to a more agile methodology." Fresh eyes? I kept my voice level. "Jessica, I wrote every line of that project architecture. I know every stakeholder, every technical dependency, which is exactly why you're too close to it." She finally met my gaze, her smile sharp with ambition. "Sometimes experience becomes baggage. Claire, no offense." Offense was entirely intended. The pattern accelerated through June. My direct reports were restructured away, reassigned to other departments with explanations about organizational optimization. My budget was carved up and redistributed, leaving me with just enough resources to maintain existing systems, but nothing for innovation. Even my parking spot, ridiculously petty but symbolically devastating, was relocated to the far lot. Due to renovation of the executive garage, but it was the July company retreat that showed me how complete my erasure had become. The annual strategic planning session in Napa Valley had always been my domain. I'd designed the framework, facilitated the sessions, turned wine-soaked brainstorming into actionable roadmaps. This year, my invitation arrived late, incomplete, missing the hotel information and agenda. Small oversight, Sandra explained when I inquired. You're actually scheduled for the secondary session. Ethan thought you'd prefer the intimate setting. Just you and the operational teams. The operational teams. Not strategy, not leadership, operations. I'd been demoted to the kids' table without anyone having to file the paperwork. I went anyway. Pride be damned. Sitting in the auxiliary conference room of a Best Western while the executives held court at the Auberge du Soleil, I listened to mid-level managers complain about database migrations and server capacity. Through the hotel's thin walls, I could hear a wedding reception, some couple beginning their journey while mine was being forcibly ended. That night, I sat in my economy room, another booking error, and opened my laptop. The company directory still listed me as senior director. But my name had been removed from every strategic initiative, every innovation committee, every decision-making body that mattered. I was a ghost with a salary, a remnant of the old guard waiting to be swept away. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Rodriguez, one of the few allies I had left. Heard Ethan's bringing in someone from McKinsey for a special project. Your role, Claire? They're not even trying to hide it anymore. I closed the laptop and reached for my father's portfolio, which I'd started carrying with me like a talisman. The leather was worn smooth where his hands had held it, carrying it through his own corporate battles. Inside, between yellowed contracts and faded memos, I found his handwritten note on Vertex Dynamics letterhead, the old logo, from when it was still called Vertex Solutions. Power isn't given, Claire. It's built brick by brick, contract by contract, and sometimes it's hidden in the fine print, waiting for someone smart enough to read between the lines. I spread the documents across the bedspread. Incorporation papers, merger agreements, stockholder compacts from 1987. Most of it was standard corporate archaeology, irrelevant to the modern company. But one document, a supplementary shareholders' agreement, had multiple passages highlighted in my father's careful hand. The language was dense, written in the labyrinthine legalese of the 80s, but certain phrases jumped out. Protective provisions. Founders' equity reconstitution. Involuntary termination clauses. My father had been more than just an early investor. He'd been an architect of the company's founding structure. Outside, the wedding band played At Last, while couples slow danced into their futures. I sat surrounded by the past, tracing my father's annotations, beginning to understand what he'd left me. Not just memories or motivation, but something far more valuable, leverage. Ethan Marlowe thought he was playing chess while I was stuck in checkers. He didn't realize I'd been holding the board itself all along. I started photographing every page, uploading them to a secure cloud server. Tomorrow, I'd return to the office and continue the charade of my slow-motion execution. I'd smile at Sandra's false sympathy, nod at Ethan's condescending concerns, and let them believe I was beaten. But tonight, in this cheap hotel room with someone else's happiness echoing through the walls, I was beginning to see the shape of my resurrection. They were measuring me for a corporate coffin. They had no idea I was building their gallows. The storage room in the basement of Vertex Dynamics hadn't been touched in years. Officially, it was scheduled for digitization. Eventually, unofficially. It was where corporate history went to gather dust, forgotten by everyone except the maintenance staff and, apparently, me. I'd come down on a Thursday afternoon in early August, ostensibly to archive my old project files, the kind of bureaucratic busy work that my reduced role now demanded. But I was hunting for something specific, any trace of my father's involvement with the company beyond what I'd found in his portfolio. Richard Whitford. His name appeared on a box label. Faded, but legible. Tucked behind towers of obsolete technical manuals. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled it free. The cardboard soft with age and basement humidity. Inside, incorporation documents. Board meeting minutes from 1986 to 1989, and correspondence between my father and the original founders. But it was the leather-bound folder at the bottom, identical to the one in my office, that made my breath catch. This one bore the initials R.W. in gold leaf, barely visible beneath layers of dust. I sat on the concrete floor, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and opened it carefully. More contracts, more agreements. But these were different, annotated not just by my father, but by someone else. Someone who signed marginal notes as Sh. K. The handwriting was precise, legal, questioning specific clauses with the meticulousness of someone who understood corporate law at a molecular level. A business card fell out, yellowed but intact. Harold Keaton, Corporate Counsel, Whitford Industries. Whitford Industries? My father hadn't just been an investor, he'd had his own company. The first document was a merger agreement from 1987, when Vertex Solutions absorbed Whitford Industries' technology division. The terms were complex, but one section had been circled multiple times in red ink. Section 7.3, Protective Equity Provision. In the event of involuntary termination without documented cause of any Whitford family member employed by the successor company, 52% of common stock shall automatically revert to the Whitford Family Trust, established herein, to protect against bad faith employment practices and ensure founding family representation in perpetuity. I read it 3 times, my heart rate accelerating with each pass. My father hadn't just negotiated a job for me someday, he'd built a nuclear option into the company's foundation. The subsequent pages detailed the trust structure, the specific conditions for activation, the legal precedents that made it ironclad. Harold Keaton's notes were everywhere. Wargaming scenarios, anticipating challenges. One note, dated 1988, was particularly prescient. R. W. Concerned about future hostile management. This clause is insurance, hopefully never needed, but devastating if triggered. A sound in the hallway made me freeze. Footsteps, then voices. Security doing rounds. I quickly photographed the crucial pages, my phone flash reflecting off the glossy old paper like lightning in the basement gloom. The guards passed without checking the storage room, their conversation fading into the distance. I kept reading, finding more pieces of the puzzle. My father had been forced out in 1989, a strategic restructuring that looked remarkably similar to what I was experiencing now. But he'd left with dignity, and, more importantly, with this clause intact. A time bomb in the corporate structure that no one had thought to defuse because no one remembered it existed. The final document in the folder was a letter from Harold Keaton to my father, dated just months before his death. Richard, the provision remains binding and transfers to Claire upon your passing. I've verified this with 3 independent firms. The company has grown beyond recognition, but the original agreements stand. Should Claire ever need this protection, I remain available. The powerful forget that contracts have longer memories than they do. H. Key. Below it, a phone number and address in San Francisco. I sat in that basement, surrounded by the detritus of corporate evolution, holding dynamite disguised as old paper. Ethan Marlowe was systematically destroying my career, but he was about to hand me the match to light this fuse. All I needed was for him to fire me without cause, and given his track record, that seemed inevitable. The irony was delicious. Ethan prided himself on being thorough, on understanding every angle of the business. But he'd never bothered to excavate this deep into Vertex's history. Why would he? He was the future. Everything else was legacy thinking. I carefully returned most documents to their box, keeping only the crucial contracts and Harold Keaton's contact information. As I stood to leave, I noticed another box, smaller, marked Board Minutes, 1987-1990. Inside, I found the smoking gun, meeting notes documenting the board's unanimous approval of the protective equity provision, signed by all 7 original board members, legal, binding, and forgotten. That evening, I called the number on Harold Keaton's card, expecting nothing. The voice that answered was elderly but sharp. Ms. Whitford, I've been expecting your call for about 20 years. Your father always said you'd need me eventually. How bad is it? I gave him the synopsis. Ethan's systematic campaign, the isolation, the inevitable termination coming my way. Without documented cause, you said? I could hear him smiling through the phone. Ms. Whitford, your father was many things, but above all, he was prescient. That clause was his gift to you, wrapped in legal language and waiting for exactly this moment. Will it hold? I asked. Will it hold? Harold laughed, a sound like aged whiskey. My dear, I spent 2 years making sure it would hold against God himself. Some nobody executive trying to push out a Whitford. He might as well be signing over the company with his own pen. We arranged to meet that weekend. I hung up and looked at my reflection in my office window, the city lights blinking below. For months, I'd watched my professional identity being dismantled, piece by piece. But in that basement, covered in dust and corporate archaeology, I'd found my father's final lesson. Power isn't just about position or politics. Sometimes it's about patience, waiting for your moment with a contract that predates your enemy's ambition. Ethan thought he was erasing me from Vertex Dynamics' future. He was actually writing himself out of it entirely. The call came on a Tuesday morning in September, delivered with the kind of corporate courtesy that barely masked its violence. Claire, could you join us in conference room C? Just a quick discussion. Sandra's voice through the phone was professionally neutral, but I could hear Ethan's coaching in her measured tone. Conference room C. Not the executive boardroom, not even my old meeting space. They'd chosen the small, windowless room typically used for vendor negotiations and exit interviews. The message was clear before I even arrived. I took my time walking there, each step measured. My father's portfolio tucked under my arm like armor. Employees I'd mentored for years avoided eye contact in the hallway, already informed of my fate through the corporate whisper network that moved faster than any official communication. Inside the room, Ethan, immaculate in navy Armani, Patricia Morse from HR, her face a practiced mask of sympathy, and a young man I didn't recognize. Probably legal, his notepad already filled with pre-written scripts. Claire, please sit. Ethan gestured to the chair across from them, 3 against 1, the classic termination formation. I want to start by saying how much we value your contributions to Vertex Dynamics. 18 years of contributions, I corrected, sitting down carefully, placing the portfolio on the table with deliberate precision. Patricia jumped in, her voice dripping with rehearsed empathy. Yes, and that's what makes this so difficult. But as you know, the company's moving in new strategic directions, requiring fresh perspectives and agile thinking. Ethan interrupted, unable to resist his buzzwords, even now. Your skill set, while impressive, is no longer aligned with our transformation objectives. I let the silence stretch, watching Patricia fidget with her papers. The young legal associate, his nameplate read Derek Morrison, kept glancing at Ethan for cues. So you're firing me, I stated flatly. After 18 years, you're terminating my employment. We prefer to frame it as a strategic separation. Ethan leaned back, his confidence radiating like cologne. Of course, we're prepared to offer a generous severance package, 3 months' salary, continued health benefits through year-end, and a glowing recommendation letter. How generous. I opened the portfolio slowly, pulling out a single sheet of paper. And the cause for this termination? Patricia shuffled through her documents. As outlined in your employment agreement, the company reserves the right to terminate without cause, provided appropriate severance is offered. Without cause. I repeated the words like a prayer. So there's no performance issue? No misconduct? No documented failures? Derek shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Whitford, the company doesn't require specific cause for. I understand what the company doesn't require, I interrupted, sliding the paper across the table. I'm more interested in what the company has forgotten. Ethan picked up the document, his brow furrowing as he read. I watched the color drain from his face in real time. Better than any performance review I'd ever received. This is... He started, then stopped, handing the paper to Derek with hands that weren't quite steady. A supplementary shareholders agreement from 1987, I supplied helpfully. Section 7.3 specifically. I've highlighted the relevant passage about involuntary termination without cause. Of any Whitford family member. Derek read it once, twice, then a third time, his legal training warring with his youth. Mr. Marlowe, this appears to be invalid, Ethan snapped, recovering his composure. This is a 37-year-old document. It can't possibly still be legally binding. I pulled out the second document. Here's the board resolution from 1987, unanimously approving and incorporating this provision into the company's foundational agreements. Never amended, never superseded. Harold Keaton. Perhaps you've heard of him. Senior partner at Keaton, Marshall and Associates. He's already verified its validity with 3 independent firms. Patricia had gone pale, frantically typing on her tablet. I need to contact legal immediately. Please do, I encouraged. While you're at it, you might want to calculate what 52% of Vertex Dynamics' current valuation amounts to. Last I checked, we were worth approximately $3 billion. The room felt airless. Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is extortion. This is contract law, I corrected. You're terminating me without cause, exactly as the provision stipulates. My father saw this coming 40 years ago. He knew that someday. Someone like you would come along, someone who confused disruption with destruction, who thought that erasing history meant escaping it. We'll fight this. Ethan's voice had lost its polish. We'll bury you in litigation. You're welcome to try. I stood, gathering my portfolio with unhurried grace. But you might want to consult with your board first. Explain to them how your personal vendetta against me is about to cost them majority control of the company. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by your strategic vision then. Derek cleared his throat. Mr. Marlowe. If this provision is valid, and it appears to be, proceeding with Ms. Whitford's termination would automatically trigger the equity transfer. We should do nothing, Ethan snarled. She's bluffing. I moved toward the door, then paused. Patricia. I assume you'll need this in writing? I pulled out a single sheet from the portfolio. My formal acknowledgement of termination without cause, dated and signed. You'll want this for your records when the equity transfer executes. I set it on the table gently, like laying down a royal flush. You have 24 hours to reconsider, I told them. After that, Harold Keaton files the transfer paperwork with the SEC. Oh, and Ethan. I met his eyes directly for the first time since he'd arrived at Vertex. That fresh perspective you're so fond of? You're about to get a very intimate look at what it feels like to have someone else control your future. I left them in that airless room, 3 executives staring at papers that had just transformed from corporate archaeology into corporate apocalypse. In the hallway, employees pretended to work, but I could feel their attention following me to the elevator. Inside, alone finally. I allowed myself one small smile. They'd scheduled this meeting for 10 a.m., thinking they were orchestrating my professional funeral. Instead, they'd just signed their own death warrant, using my termination letter as the pen. Harold Keaton's office occupied the 42nd floor of a building that predated Silicon Valley's glass obsession, all dark wood and leather that spoke of deals made with handshakes rather than DocuSign. At 78, Harold moved with the careful precision of someone who'd outlasted every trend and revolution the Bay Area had thrown at him. Your father sat in that exact chair, he said, pouring scotch from a crystal decanter despite it being barely noon. Same situation, different decade. They tried to force him out too. I accepted the glass, the weight of it substantial in my hand, but he didn't have the leverage I do. No, he created it instead. Harold settled behind his desk, pulling out a file that had to be 3 inches thick. Richard spent 2 years negotiating that clause. Claire, 2 years of late nights, of fighting with lawyers who said it couldn't be done, of convincing board members who thought he was paranoid. He spread the documents across his desk like tarot cards revealing a fortune. But he knew. He said, Harold, I'm building this for Claire. She'll need it someday when some bastard in an expensive suit tries to tell her she's obsolete. Prophetic, I murmured, studying the papers. Strategic, Harold corrected. Now, they'll come at us hard. Ethan Marlowe might be an idiot, but Vertex has deep pockets and expensive lawyers. They'll claim the provision is antiquated, that the company structure has changed too dramatically, that the spirit of the agreement no longer applies. And Harold's smile was sharp as a blade. And they'll lose. See, your father didn't just write this clause, he bulletproofed it. Every merger, every acquisition, every restructuring since 1987 has language preserving pre-existing shareholder agreements. Their own legal diligence validates our position. He pulled out a laptop, surprisingly modern for someone his age. I've had my team preparing since you called. We're ready to file with the SEC the moment you give the word. But Claire, understand what you're unleashing. This isn't just about getting your job back. I know. I took a sip of scotch, feeling it burn away months of humiliation. It's about taking the whole company. 52% of it, technically, but that's enough. You'll control the board, can remove executives at will, reshape the entire organization. He studied me over his glasses. Your father wanted protection for you. I don't think even he imagined you'd end up running the place. My phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from Patricia in HR, 12 from Ethan, and 1 from Charles Rothman, chairman of the board. I showed Harold the screen. Ah, now they're paying attention. He pulled out his own phone. I leaked just enough to the right people. Word's spreading through the valley that Vertex is about to have a very interesting ownership change. What's our timeline? They fired you at 10 a.m. Tuesday. Without written retraction by 10 a.m. Wednesday. The clause activates automatically. We file the papers, and by market close, you're majority shareholder. He refilled his glass. Of course, they'll try to negotiate. Offer you CEO. Probably, or a board seat with a massive pay increase. Not interested. Good. Because they'll also try to destroy you, your reputation, your personal life, anything they can weaponize. I've seen it before. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a text from Tom Rodriguez. Local news just got a tip about corporate espionage at Vertex. They're saying you stole confidential documents. Ethan's work. I showed Harold, who laughed. Amateur hour. We'll have a cease and desist filed within the hour. Defamation suit to follow if they persist. We spent the next 3 hours wargaming scenarios. Harold's young associates, hungry lawyers who reminded me of sharks in Armani, preparing briefs and documentation. They'd created a timeline of my systematic marginalization, complete with emails, meeting records, and witness statements from employees willing to testify about Ethan's campaign against me. Ms. Whitford. One associate, Jennifer Wu, looked up from her laptop. We've just received an interesting development. 3 institutional investors holding 12% of Vertex stock are inquiring about the validity of your claim. They seem supportive. Vultures sensing blood, Harold translated. They know Ethan's been underperforming. You represent stability, legacy knowledge. The market hates uncertainty, but it hates incompetent leadership more. By evening, Harold's conference room had transformed into a war room. Financial analysts on one side, legal team on the other, all preparing for corporate combat. I stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker to life, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Power. They'll cave, Harold said, joining me at the window. Probably around 3 a.m., when they realize their legal position is untenable, they'll offer you everything to make this go away. And when I refuse? Then Thursday morning, you walk into Vertex Dynamics as majority shareholder. The board will call an emergency meeting. Ethan will be terminated with cause, gross negligence in failing to identify a major legal liability. And you'll assume control. Just like that? Just like that. He raised his glass to the window, toward the ghost of my father. Richard always said you had his spine, but your mother's brains. Deadly combination in business. My phone rang. Charles Rothman. Answer it, Harold advised. But remember, you hold all the cards now. I picked up activating speaker so Harold could hear, Claire. Charles's voice was strained. We need to talk. This situation has gotten out of hand. Which situation, Charles? The one where I was systematically pushed out after 18 years of service? Or the one where that decision is about to cost you control of the company? Silence. Then a sigh. What do you want? Nothing you can offer anymore, I replied. The termination stands. The clause activates tomorrow. We'll see you at the emergency board meeting. Claire, please. We can work this out. I hung up. Harold raised his glass. To your father, who saw this coming, and to you, for having the courage to pull the trigger. We clinked glasses as my phone exploded with calls and texts. Let them panic, let them scramble. Tomorrow, the filing would go through, and by Thursday, I'd return to Vertex Dynamics, not as an employee, but as an owner. Ethan Marlowe had given me exactly what I needed, a termination without cause. He thought he was ending my story. He'd actually just written himself out of it entirely. Wednesday arrived with the kind of Silicon Valley chaos that makes headlines in TechCrunch before most people finish their morning coffee. By 8 a.m., Harold's prediction had materialized. Word of Vertex's crisis had leaked, strategically, suspiciously, to every major tech investor in the valley. Our stock price dropped 12% at market open. The board was hemorrhaging money with every passing minute, and they knew exactly who to blame. I sat in Harold's conference room, watching the feeds on multiple screens while his team fielded calls from reporters, investors, and increasingly desperate Vertex executives. Jennifer Wu had been tracking internal communications through sources still loyal to me. Ethan's been in the boardroom since 6 a.m., she reported. Security says Charles Rothman arrived at 4:30, along with 3 other board members. They've called in Morrison and Associates, big guns from Palo Alto. Let them burn through billable hours, Harold said calmly, reviewing our SEC filing for the 5th time. Won't change the mathematics. At 9:47 a.m., my phone rang. Patricia from HR. Claire, Mr. Rothman would like to discuss a resolution. 13 minutes, I interrupted. You have 13 minutes before the deadline passes and we file. Whatever Charles wants to discuss, he better talk fast. The main screen lit up with an incoming video call. Charles Rothman appeared, his usually perfect silver hair disheveled, his blue eyes bloodshot. Behind him, I could see the boardroom in chaos, lawyers huddled over laptops, Ethan pacing like a caged predator. Board members on multiple phone calls. Claire, Charles began, his voice hoarse. We're prepared to offer you an immediate return to your position, with a promotion to executive vice president, reporting directly to me. 40% salary increase, accelerated vesting on all stock options, and a written apology from the company. No. Claire, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You allowed Ethan to systematically destroy my career. The board stood by and watched. Now you're facing the consequences. Ethan suddenly appeared on screen, shouldering Charles aside. This is corporate terrorism. You think you can waltz back in here and... Actually, yes. I cut him off. That's exactly what I think. In fact, that's what's legally about to happen unless you can provide documented cause for my termination in the next 11 minutes. We'll file injunctions, Ethan snarled. We'll tie this up in court for years. Harold leaned into frame beside me. Mr. Marlowe, I've been practicing corporate law since before you were born. You file an injunction. We file for emergency shareholder protection. We've already got 3 major institutional investors ready to back Claire's claim. You want a public fight? By all means, let's have one. Charles pushed Ethan out of view. What if we rescind the termination? Right now, immediately. You return as senior director. We proceed as if Tuesday never happened. Tuesday did happen, I replied. And it's too late for takebacks. You made your choice. Then what about CEO? Charles's desperation was showing. The board is prepared to terminate Ethan immediately and install you as CEO. Behind him, Ethan exploded. You can't be serious. Charles, she's using some ancient loophole? That you failed to identify. Charles snapped back. Your due diligence was supposed to catch these things. They were fracturing, turning on each other. Beautiful. 5 minutes, Jennifer announced quietly. Claire. Charles tried once more. Your father wouldn't want this. He believed in building companies, not destroying them. My father built protections into this company's DNA specifically for this moment, I responded. And Vertex won't be destroyed. It'll be under new management, mine. The background chaos intensified. I could see board members arguing, papers being thrown. Someone, looked like the CFO, actually walking out. 2 minutes, Jennifer called. Last chance, Claire. Charles said, name your price. Anything within reason. My price was 18 years of loyalty, innovation, and dedication. You sold that for Ethan's empty promises of transformation. I stood, gathering my things. Harold, please file the papers. No, wait. Charles started, but Harold was already typing. SEC filing submitted. Harold announced at exactly 10 a.m. Transfer of 52% equity to the Whitford Family Trust. Claire Whitford trustee, effective immediately pending standard verification. On screen, the boardroom erupted. Lawyers scrambling, board members shouting, Ethan standing frozen in apparent shock. Charles stared directly at the camera, his expression a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. You've made a powerful enemy today, Claire. No, Charles, I've become a powerful owner. There's a difference. I ended the call. The room stayed quiet for a moment, then Harold's team burst into spontaneous applause. Someone popped champagne, premature, perhaps? But the moment deserved marking. They'll contest it, Jennifer warned, though she was smiling. This isn't over. Of course they will, Harold agreed. But the provision is airtight. The board knows it, their lawyers know it, and most importantly, the market will know it. By close of business today, Claire Whitford will be the majority shareholder of Vertex Dynamics. My phone buzzed with a message from Tom Rodriguez. Stock price recovering. News just broke that you're taking control. Investors actually seem relieved. Ethan's office is being packed up by security. I looked at the screens showing Vertex's stock price, watching it climb back toward stability. The market had spoken. It preferred the devil it knew. The 18-year veteran who'd built half the company's value, over Ethan's flashy but substanceless leadership. What's your first act as majority shareholder? Harold asked. Emergency board meeting, tomorrow at 8 a.m. I decided. They'll expect scorched earth, massive terminations, revenge served cold. And instead, I'll give them what Ethan never could, an actual vision for Vertex's future, built on our real strengths rather than buzzword bingo. But first, I pulled out my phone, composing a company-wide email. To the Vertex Dynamics team. By now, you've heard about today's ownership transition. I want to assure you that this change is about leadership, not labor. Your jobs are safe. Your projects continue. The only thing changing is who sits in the corner office. We built this company together. Now, let's save it together. I hit send, knowing it would reach every employee before Ethan could even clean out his desk. Merciful, Harold observed. Strategic, I corrected, echoing his earlier words. Ethan thought fear was power. He's about to learn that loyalty beats fear every time. As we watched the storm continue to rage at Vertex headquarters through news feeds and insider updates, I felt the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that boardroom not as an employee, but as the majority owner. The game Ethan started was about to end, and I was holding all the pieces. Thursday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of Northern California day that made you forget the earthquakes and wildfires were always waiting. I stood outside Vertex Dynamics at 7:45 a.m., looking up at the building I'd helped grow from 12 floors to 30. Harold flanked my right, Jennifer Wu on my left, both dressed for corporate warfare. We'd deliberately arrived early, knowing the board had been here since dawn, plotting their last stand strategies. Ready? Harold asked. 18 years ready, I replied, and pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby security guard, Marcus, who'd worked here almost as long as I had, actually stood up when he saw me. Ms. Whitford, welcome back. Thank you. Marcus, I'll need executive elevator access restored. He handed me a new key card without hesitation. Already done, ma'am. Mr. Marlowe's access was revoked at midnight. The executive floor felt different, charged, like the air before lightning strikes. Ethan's office stood empty, his nameplate already removed, leaving only the ghost of adhesive on the door. I walked past it without stopping, heading straight for the boardroom. Inside, they'd arranged themselves for battle, Charles at the head, 5 board members flanking him, their legal army behind them like a corporate phalanx. Ethan sat at the far end, technically no longer an employee, but apparently invited to witness his own professional funeral. Claire. Charles stood, his tone carefully neutral. Thank you for coming. My building, my boardroom, I reminded him, taking the seat directly opposite him, the challenger's position. Shall we dispense with pleasantries? Their lead counsel, a shark named David Morrison from the firm they'd panic hired, cleared his throat. Ms. Whitford, while we acknowledge the transfer of equity, the board retains operational authority until formally voted otherwise. Actually, Harold interrupted, sliding a document across the table. According to your own bylaws, Article 7, Section 3, any shareholder controlling more than 50% can call for immediate board reorganization. We're invoking that now. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. This is hostile takeover tactics. Ethan burst out, unable to contain himself. You can't just... I can, actually. I cut him off. But I won't. Not entirely. That got their attention. Charles leaned forward. Meaning? I stood, walking to the window, making them wait. Gentlemen, and I use that term loosely, you expected me to come in here with a machete, didn't you? Mass terminations, lawsuits, the full scorched earth playbook. It would be understandable, Charles admitted carefully. It would be Ethan's move, I corrected, turning to face them. All destruction, no construction. But I spent 18 years building this company's value. I'm not about to destroy it for petty revenge. I returned to my seat, pulling out a single folder. Here's what happens now. Ethan Marlowe is terminated immediately. With cause, gross negligence in risk assessment and systematic destruction of company value through talent mismanagement. That's slander, Ethan started. That's documented fact, Jennifer interrupted, producing her own folder. We have 17 written complaints from senior staff about your management practices, 3 pending hostile workplace investigations, and detailed documentation of how you've hemorrhaged talent. Vertex has lost 43 key engineers in the past 6 months alone. Ethan's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. His face went from red to white. Second, I continued, the current CEO, Robert Hayes, who notably allowed this disaster to unfold, will announce his retirement within 30 days. Generous package, glowing farewell, no public drama. Robert, who'd been silent until now, nodded slowly. He was 63, smart enough to recognize a golden parachute when offered. Third, Charles remains chairman, but with modified authority. The board stays intact, for now, but reports to the majority shareholder on all strategic decisions. You're keeping us? Board member Patricia Huang looked genuinely surprised. You're not all incompetent, I said bluntly. Just complacent. That changes today. And the CEO position? Charles asked, though he already knew the answer. Mine, effective immediately. Not as revenge, but as necessity. I know every contract, every client, every line of code that makes this company run. We're hemorrhaging talent and losing market position while you've been playing musical chairs with executives. I stood again, this time moving to the presentation screen. While you've been panicking about my takeover, I've been working. 3 major clients Ethan lost, I've already reached out. 2 are willing to return under new leadership. The engineering team that resigned en masse? Half are interested in coming back if Ethan's gone. The room shifted, tension giving way to something else. Hope, maybe, or at least pragmatic acceptance. You planned this, Charles said slowly. Not just the takeover, the recovery. I've had 6 months of marginalization to think, I replied. You gave me plenty of time to strategize while you were busy erasing me. Ethan stood abruptly. This is insane. You're going to let her. Security is waiting outside to escort you out, I informed him. Your personal items have been packed. Your corporate accounts are frozen pending investigation of several suspicious transactions Jennifer's team uncovered. What's suspicious? The McKinsey consultant you tried to hire to replace me? Jennifer pulled out another document. Turns out he's your brother-in-law. The innovation fund you established, traced to a personal account in Delaware. We have more, if you'd like to discuss it with federal investigators. Ethan's lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. Without another word, they left. Ethan's 18-month reign ending with a whimper. The boardroom felt larger without him. So, Charles said after a long moment, what now? Now we get to work, I said simply. First all-hands meeting at noon. We're going to be transparent about the transition, clear about the path forward, and aggressive about reclaiming our market position. And us? Board member James Chen asked. The board? You have 6 months to prove you deserve to stay. Active participation, real oversight, no more rubber stamping whoever talks the smoothest game. I met each of their eyes. My father built safeguards into this company because he believed in its potential. I'm giving you one chance to prove him right. Harold passed out the prepared agreements, CEO appointment, Ethan's termination, the restructuring terms. One by one, they signed. They had no choice. Really. But I'd given them dignity in defeat. As the meeting concluded, Charles lingered. Your father would be proud. My father would wonder why it took me so long, I replied. What about forgiveness? Moving forward? I looked at him directly. This is moving forward, Charles. Forgiveness is a luxury I'll consider after Vertex is stable again. By noon, I stood before the assembled company in the main auditorium, looking out at hundreds of faces, some hopeful, some skeptical, all wondering what came next. My name is Claire Whitford, I began. I've worked here for 18 years. I've been your colleague, your director, and as of today, I'm your CEO and majority owner. We have work to do. The applause started slowly, then built to something genuine. They weren't clapping for a takeover, they were clapping for stability, for someone who actually knew their names, their projects, their value. 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where Ethan had once orchestrated my humiliation. But now, sunlight streamed through windows I'd had installed, replacing the fortress-like walls he'd preferred. The quarterly reports spread across the table told a story of resurrection. Stock price up 37%, employee retention at a 5-year high, and 3 major contracts secured that Ethan had lost. Charles Rothman sat across from me, reviewing the numbers with something approaching admiration. The Jensen Industries deal alone will generate more revenue than Ethan's entire transformation initiative promised. Turns out clients prefer working with people who actually understand their business, I replied, signing the approval for our new R&D expansion. The door opened, and Jennifer Wu entered, now our chief legal officer, a promotion she'd earned by navigating the treacherous waters of the takeover. Claire, there's something you should see. She handed me a tablet showing a TechCrunch article. Former Vertex CEO Ethan Marlowe's startup fails to secure funding, closes after 4 months. I read it without satisfaction or sympathy. Ethan had become irrelevant the moment he'd left our building. His story was over. Mine was just beginning. Archive it, I told Jennifer. We have real work to focus on. That afternoon, I walked through the engineering floor, something Ethan had never done. Developers who'd hidden in their cubicles during his reign now actively sought me out, sharing ideas, proposing innovations. The culture of fear had been replaced by something far more powerful: purpose. Tom Rodriguez, now VP of Product Development, joined me by the coffee station where Ethan had once dismissed my contributions. Remember when he said foundation isn't architecture? Every day, I admitted. Well, the team's been talking. We want to name the new platform architecture after your father. The Whitford Framework. Seems fitting, considering. I felt my throat tighten unexpectedly. He would have loved that. That evening, I returned to my office, not Ethan's old space, but a new one I'd created by opening up walls, making room for collaboration rather than isolation. On my desk sat two things: the latest P&L statements showing our strongest quarter in 3 years, and my father's leather portfolio, now restored and prominently displayed. Harold Keaton called just as the sun was setting over the bay. Heard Marlowe's venture collapsed. So I saw. Any regrets? You could have destroyed him completely with those fraud investigations. I considered the question, looking at a photo from today's all-hands meeting. Hundreds of employees, energized and engaged. Destroying him would have been about the past. Building this is about the future. Your father's daughter, through and through. After Harold hung up, I stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker to life. The same view I'd had 18 years ago when I'd started here. But everything else had changed. The company that had tried to discard me now bore my imprint on every decision, every strategy, every success. Patricia Morse from HR knocked and entered. She'd survived the transition by becoming invaluable in rebuilding our corporate culture. The board meeting minutes for your approval. They've unanimously approved the employee equity program you proposed. I signed without hesitation. Sharing ownership, real ownership, with the people who built value, my father would have approved. Oh, and Claire? Patricia paused at the door. That young developer Ethan hired right before he left, Marcus Brennan, he asked if you'd mentor him. Said he wants to learn from someone who understands the long game. Send him up Monday morning. I agreed. Even Ethan's hire deserved a chance under proper leadership. Alone again. I opened my laptop to review tomorrow's agenda. We were announcing 3 strategic acquisitions, launching an innovation lab, and promoting 15 internal candidates who'd been overlooked during Ethan's reign. The company that had nearly collapsed under the weight of ego and incompetence was now stronger than ever. My computer chimed with an email from Charles Rothman. Board unanimously approves extending CEO contract indefinitely. Congratulations, Claire. You didn't just save Vertex, you transformed it. I smiled, remembering Ethan's favorite word, transformation. He'd thought it meant destroying the old to make way for his new. But real transformation isn't about erasure, it's about evolution. Building on foundations rather than demolishing them. The office grew quiet as evening deepened. I gathered my things, stopping to straighten my father's portfolio one last time. Inside, that decades-old clause still rested, the nuclear option that had changed everything. But it had never been about revenge or destruction. It had been about protection, about ensuring that merit and loyalty meant more than flash and politics. As I headed for the elevator, I passed the wall where we'd mounted a new plaque. Vertex Dynamics, built on innovation, sustained by integrity. Below it, smaller but significant, founded 1987, reborn 2024. Marcus the security guard was just starting his night shift. Have a good evening, Miss Whitford. See you tomorrow? Every tomorrow, Marcus. That's the plan. Outside, the California evening was perfect. Warm breeze, clear sky, the promise of another day to build something meaningful. I thought about Ethan, probably in some rental office somewhere, pitching another transformation to another unwitting audience. He'd learned nothing from his fall, but I'd learned everything from mine. Power isn't about the corner office or the title or even the equity stake. It's about understanding that companies aren't built on disruption. They're built on dedication. They're not transformed by erasure. They're strengthened by evolution. And sometimes, just sometimes, the old guard isn't what needs replacing. Sometimes it's exactly what needs to be in charge. I drove home through streets I'd traveled for 18 years, past the coffee shop where I'd hidden and cried after particularly brutal meetings with Ethan, past the park where I'd spent lunch hours planning my survival. All of it had led here, not to revenge, but to redemption. Not just mine, but the company's. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I checked it at a red light. Ms. Whitford, you don't know me, but I'm a junior developer at Vertex. Thank you for reminding us why we chose this company. For the first time in 2 years, I'm excited about Monday. That was worth more than any stock price, any board approval, any vindication. I'd won not by becoming Ethan, but by being everything he wasn't. Patient where he was impulsive, inclusive where he was divisive, strategic where he was theatrical. The light turned green. I drove forward into the evening, toward tomorrow, toward the future we were building on the foundation of the past. Ethan had given me the perfect gift with that termination without cause. He'd activated a clause that didn't just protect me, but ultimately protected the entire company from people like him. My father had been gone for 20 years, but his foresight had saved everything he'd helped create. And now, finally, I understood his last words to me. Power isn't about what you can tear down, Claire. It's about what remains standing after the storm. Vertex Dynamics remained standing, stronger than ever, and I was just getting started. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this revenge tale from the corporate world, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Claire's position? Let me know in the comments.